All right, let's get one thing straight right up front. This is not a review because these guns I got to shoot aren't production guns, but it is a preview and kind of a proof of concept of what they have on offer. You expect me to say it because I'm a gun tuber, but I'm also a gun nerd, and this is the gun nerd part of me speaking, but this is one of the most interesting and innovative pistols I've looked at in quite a while. It's what happens when a precision bolt gun company says, let's make a really cool pistol, and it's available in two major configurations, a sight block version suitable for USPSA limited optics, or a compensated version for the 2011 Flex Pros, because it's too heavy for IDPA. All right, just being transparent, putting it right on the table at the beginning, these two guns that I'm looking at are prototypes that were provided to me by Zermatt Arms. I think I'm saying that correctly, let's hope. I have no financial relationship with them. I don't get to, future guns that they send me if I say nice things. It was just an interesting project that I've been kind of corresponding with them about for a couple years now, and this is kind of the fruition of that. So I'm showing you these because I think they are really interesting pistols, and they're fun to shoot, so there's that. David, the guy who is in charge of the project, has been kind of talking to me for a while, and I've opined on some issues in the design of the gun, not like I was consulting or anything like that, but I know that I wasn't the only kind of like high-end pistol dude who was being talked to. And the result of that, where they already had, really good ideas, is a very refined thing, and I think anyone who picks up this gun and shoots it is gonna think it's special. And to that point, here is my reaction shooting the gun for the first time. Yeah, that smile on my face, that's just because the gun is ridiculous. And my buddy Danny, who came out to shoot groups with it later on, this was his response.
I wasn't looking for sight, but that's a stupid gun.
So that's the level of entertainment we're dealing with the pistol. So why am I saying that the gun is innovative? Well, it is a steel frame striker gun, which doesn't sound all that interesting at first, but then you look closer, it's got a 2011 trigger bow with a 2011 like release and break. This is not it's kind of like a high-end 2011 break. No, it is like a 2011 break. I'm telling you, when you pull the trigger, it's absolutely as ridiculous as any Atlas or Infinity you put in your hand. There is basically zero trigger movement, and the release, I'm not even going to tell you how light the release is set because I don't want to spoil the surprise for you. I want you to encounter one of these guns in the wild and pull the trigger and just have that sense of awe. But what makes it interesting further is that there is a locking block in this, kind of like a Beretta pistol, but it's not like a Beretta pistol because there is a roller on the locking block. So I don't know if you consider it roller delayed or whatever, but the barrel and the roller go into the frame, and as a result, the barrel kind of moves silky smooth. But it doesn't end there. It's got a modular grip like a 2011, meaning that this is the steel subframe. This is a two-piece aluminum grip module that bolts on. You can see the split in the frame kind of going down the middle, so it sandwiches together on the subframe. Apparently the trigger pack is modular. I didn't get bold enough to try and remove that from it, but apparently there is that. There are grip panels on the side of the gun allowing you to kind of tune the grip texture, and a modular mag well that you can swap out. There are two sizes. There is the TAC Bro size and the USPSA limited optics size. You can kind of see those there. And despite the ridiculous trigger, what you won't notice is a manual safety. I know that there is a set out there who absolutely hates manual safeties, and this is the gun for you. And I know some of you are immediately thinking, well, that's a pretty flashy trigger to not have a manual safety. Surely the gun isn't drop safe. But it is drop safe. The guys at Zermatt sent me the videos of them drop testing the pistol, and YouTube, what you're seeing on the screen right now, is safety checked in a controlled environment with primed cases. It's not live ammunition. They are testing to see if the striker will release on the muzzle drop and the rear drop of the gun. When you consider the price tag of these, and I don't know the final MSRP, but it's in like the 5 to 6 range, like it's that's with 3 zeros at the end. That's right, it's gonna be a lot of money. Kind of hurts to look at, really. But then it's got an ambi slide stop, kind of like a 1911, and as a result, the takedown is similar to a 1911, where you push, you pull the slide to the rear a little bit, and you push on the back of the slide stop. It pops out a little bit, you pull it out, and then the slide comes forward. But like a Glock, you then have to pull the trigger to get the slide off the frame. Kind of weird how it does both. And it does have a disconnector, like there's a disconnector milled into it like a 2011. So it's this weird sort of hybrid space that we've never really explored before. and it is kind of super premium. But then there's other really nice kind of attention to detail sort of items. If you look at just the guide rod and how it's machined, it's gorgeous. But what's probably the coolest thing about this gun is that there is a really innovative way they attach the plates. Rather than just sandwiching a plate onto the slide with screws, which is what everybody else does, they actually have little bosses coming off the plate that go down into the slide, and there are screws that come in from the back of the gun. That's right, you remove the firing pin stop plate, and there are 2 channels that secure into those. And as a result, you don't even have to Loctite the plates on because the screws are retained in such a way that the back plate won't let them walk out, and there's not enough space for them to walk out. So the plate's not going anywhere, but you still have your optic screws going down into that plate. These represent the 2 different types of grip panels that they've got. There's these grip tape ones, which are suitable for like USPSA, and then there's these machined aluminum ones that are kind of more like trying to be your Goldilocks texture. I find them a little slick, but I've got really leathery palms because I shoot a bunch. I'm sure one of you can come up with a clever joke about having leathery palms, but you know, there's your softball. But more importantly, when you pick it up, the fit and finish on the gun, like let's realize the 2011, you know, $5,000 gun space is a flex bro space. So it's like dudes with Rolexes looking down their nose at, you know, every other watch wearer out there, and the dudes who have Pateks even more so. This is very much like that, because the most important thing to flex bros is how nice does the gun feel in the safe area. So when you move the slide, there is less slide movement on this gun than there is on my Atlas Athena, and about the same as my Fowler Vanta. Let that sink in a little bit. You flex bros know exactly what that means, and this gun is nicer than an Atlas as far as just messing with the fit of the gun. And the trigger is right there with an Atlas as well. Like, you're leaving nothing on the table. So now that you know all of the nerdery type stuff, you can go on their website and read all the other, you know, what type of stainless steel they're making the things out of and all that. But before we go into the shooting comparisons, because I compared it to a Walter PDP steel frame, a Staccato XC, and the Staccato P4.5, because, you know, that's the only other sight block gun that I've got. And the guns are just absolutely silly to shoot. But before we get there are some things you need to understand about how guns shoot, because people ask me, like, which is softer and flatter? And like, there's a number of sort of immutable characteristics of pistols you have to consider when you're comparing how guns shoot. The first and foremost is going to be the weight. These things, as I mentioned, they have varying weights depending on how they are set up, but they're in about the mid 40 ounces range without magazines. The next thing you have to consider is the bore axis, and really what that is the relation from the back of your hand where it mounts on the gun and where the center of the bore line is. So this has a bore axis more similar to like a Glock pistol than it does a proper 1911 pistol. So what that means is that when the slide bottoms out, it's going to want to lift, but because there is, you know, less leverage for the barrel being higher and the slide riding higher, it doesn't lift as much as something with a higher bore axis. So there's less rotation in the gun. The other thing that affects rotation in the gun is the grip, how your support hand is able to resist the turning moment of the gun trying to recoil. So really good traction can mitigate some of the rotation of a gun firing, whereas really slick traction kind of punishes you and lets the gun kind of rotate. Then obviously you can affect rotation by throwing a compensator on the guns, which is this compensator obviously comes from the factory, but that's for YouTube's sake. But yeah, there's a pretty good single port comp on this bad boy. So shooting it back to back with the Walter PDP steel frame, because that was the most similar gun of a steel frame striker gun I could think of. And it's not exactly a, you know, perfect comparison, because this is a sight block gun, meaning that the slide is shorter, so there's not as much mass that's bottoming out causing the rotation. There is a barrel weight at the front, but you can see it in the slow motion that it's just generally more serene. There's less kind of oscillating as this gun goes back into battery. So it does shoot nicer than a Walter steel frame, and the trigger, and as good as the Walter steel frame guns are, is significantly nicer than even that trigger. Staying with the limited optics gun, shooting against the P4.5. The This is a little bit more tranquil than the P4.5, and that's interesting considering that the P4.5 is a significantly lighter gun. It's in, you know, the 35, 36 ounce range, whereas it's got about 10 ounces on it. The P45 has grip texture that runs all the way up underneath the slide, and it's pretty aggressive, so I'm able to combat the rotation. So the slide move, it doesn't look a lot different in recoil. Moving over to the comped version of the gun against the XC, which is kind of like the gold standard people want to compare comped guns to, because it was one of the first ones available from the factory. But yeah, when you look at the thing going in slow motion, there's only so much that the comp can do. You can't dumb down 9mm anymore, so you kind of have to rely on physics at that point. And the XC has more aggressive grip texture running higher on the frame. So the guns look very similar in rotation. And, you know, that's a feather in the cap of the Waltz, but also the XC, because it's a brilliant gun. So the next question is obviously, well, how does the gun group? Because it's a premium gun, it needs to group like a premium gun. Well, be it that I'm a fancy man, I went to my fancy indoor gun club with my fancy pistol rest and benched it at 25 yards using Buffalo Creek FMJ 115s. Buffalo Creek is a supporter of the channel, and if you want to be supported at Buffalo Creek, maybe try this. The results were ridiculous. So that morning I was like, wow, these are really good groups. I need to get my buddy Danny to come out and shoot this gun. And these are the groups that Danny shot with it. So the most accurate gun that I have been able to bench rest has been my Atlas Athena, but there's kind of a tie for first with the Tanfoglio Stockmaster Extreme. So I brought out the Athena because I feel like it's a better analog for this gun. So that is the Waltz with 115 range loads, and that is the Atlas Athena. The Waltz is doing a little bit better job, but absolutely in the same ballpark as an Atlas. So yeah, the Waltz is hanging right there with the Athena, perhaps even beating it. There would need to be more group testing, and I'm not your guy for that because I hate shooting groups. It's really boring. And I haven't even mentioned it to this point because the gun is so exciting and there's so much cooler stuff to talk about, but it takes Glock mags. I don't even know how many Glock mags it comes with because these are prototypes. What I can tell you is that it does come with a torque wrench branded for Zermatt Arms, which is pretty cool. So with the Glock mags, you already have a bunch of aftermarket support because there's base pads and all that kind of stuff you would need. There's already going to be holsters available. This is the X1 holster from Carry Concealment, and it has a magnet at the bottom of the holster that kind of retains the gun in the holster. This gun is so heavy it won't invert, but it is, you know, there it goes. It's, you know, basically friction-free retention on the gun because the magnet holds it in. It's a pretty cool holster. But here's where, you know, I get honest because it sounds like a gun tuber kind of glazing this new product, which is what you expect to see when there's an exciting new product. The gun is really cool and it's really worthy of attention, but here's the reality on why this is a preview and not a review. These guns are prototypes when they were sent to me. Since these guns are prototypes, they had unknown numbers of rounds, at least thousands of rounds when they showed up to me, and if you look in the port and the compensator, I didn't shoot it enough to get the lead accumulating in there, which there is. The initial intent why I have that carry holster is I was gonna shoot this gun in competition for the video to kind of shake it down and see how it does in LO. But this gun wasn't reliable enough. It had a couple issues that I had to send back, and they put the production parts in, and now the gun is reliable. But, you know, the question is, but for how long? Because if you've ever messed with a striker fire gun, you know it's a very fine line of getting it tuned up to have a ridiculous trigger and then being reliable. That's a question mark that hangs out there, so we'll have to see from, you know, getting it going. I know they've tested it extensively, and there's a bunch of dudes who've touched these guns and are really happy with them. My experience appears to be limited on these ones, but they did have light striking. I sent the guns back. They came back with the production parts in them, and now they're basically, well, this gun has been 100%. This gun had one light strike on a S&B piece of ammo. So there's that. But S&B can have light strikes on all kinds of guns. It's hard to say whether it was ammo or gun related. The other negatives that I would say, like, these are true negatives on the design, and you can argue with me about them, but The trigger is so bonkers, I feel like it should have a manual safety just for, safety during administrative gun handling, because the trigger's absurd. And then, it's like, well, that defeats the entire point of having a striker-fired gun that is, as good as a 2011. And I get that, but at the same time, I feel like a safety would make the gun safer for administrative gun handling because the trigger is bonkers. The next thing is obviously the grip traction stops right before the grip screw right there and doesn't come all the way up underneath the slide, which means guns like the P4.5 and my Staccato XC can get more out of a lighter weight gun because it resists the gun turning better. I'd love to see some more grip up there. It's such a small area. In conversations with David over at Zermatt, it's just like, that's just a really tough area for us to get traction onto without making the grip a lot bigger, and I understand it, but it's on their radar. They may try and solve it. We'll see what happens. So bottom line, it's a big, heavy, exotic pistol that absolutely hangs with the other guns in its tax bracket. For the dude that hates manual safeties, I think this is kind of the ultimate gun. It is really, really cool. I can't think of a nicer gun that is available that is not in like a 2011 format. Like, this is truly like defining the top end of the non-2011 space. I actually think I prefer this to the Alien because it has a traditional bore axis. Like, the Alien is cool, but it dumps so much energy into your wrist. This does dump more into your wrist than a 2011, which is going to rotate more, but at the same time, it's still really, really soft shooting, especially the compensated version of the gun. But I think I prefer having a little bit of bore axis and, less energy into the arm. So for like longer shooting sessions, it's really nice. And it takes Glock mags, which I'm not saying like, I need $20 mags for my $5,000 pistols. I have no idea what they're going to cost, but I think it's in that ballpark. Having Glock mags means that there are locally available options to get magazines if you run into a problem. If you leave your mags at home and you swing by a sporting goods store, you can pick up mags on the way to the range. Whereas if that were to happen in like an Alien, then you can't get mags anywhere unless you mail order them. So having a common available mag pattern is kind of cool. It's really nice. And I've said it a couple times in the video, and I'll finish with it. You could put this against any gun that costs the same in the 2011 space, and this gun hangs with it. It outshoots many of them for accuracy. The recoil impulse, it rotates less than some. It's really nice shooting. It's stupid accurate. Like, the accuracy is off the charts, which is what you could expect from a precision bolt gun company. So that's the Zermatt Arms Waltz 9. It is an absolute ripper, and I appreciate you guys watching it. If you're curious about other high-end guns that aren't 2011s, the LOK Arms Alien Creator Evolution Limited Optics was an awesome gun, and you can watch that video here.